In 2008, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan came into effect. It was a broad strategy to reduce phosphorus loads in algae cover on the lake, a plan to make the lake safer and generally move towards more protection as climate change becomes an ever-present threat to ecosystems in Ontario and worldwide. And the plan, by most accounts, was a success. Phosphorus loads decreased by 50% since the plan came into being, and algae conditions for fish in the lake have gotten better, and restrictions and legislation on what kind of development can happen on the lake's watershed and how it's conducted has made the lake a safer place to swim, live near, and enjoy. But now, more than 10 years later, a revision of this plan is on the table. And that's required by provincial legislation. But the review comes at a pivotal moment in the lake's history. The population on the lake's water has boomed. It's projected to rise by another 100,000 over the next years. And rapid infrastructure growth, climate change, rising chloride levels, and more have challenged the lake's health. A letter from the Ontario's Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks states that the revision plan to account, seeking to add further protections to the plan moving forward. However, some are still worried. The Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition was key in establishing the plan in 2008. They've been around since around 2003. And now they, along with other environmental groups like Lake Simcoe Watch, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, are urging people to get involved, make their voices heard, and give feedback as the Ministry of the Environment launches a review. Specifically, they say if people don't speak up, developers could sway the decision-making process. And that means protections of the lake that are currently in place could be in danger. I spoke to Claire Malcolmson. She's the coalition's executive director. Here's our conversation on the plan and its future.
So my name is Claire Malcolmson, and I'm the executive director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition. And the coalition has been around since 2003. We're a charity, and we're the only non-government on the health of the Lake Simcoe watershed in its entirety. We spearheaded the campaign to get the Lake Simcoe Protection Act and its implementation regulations, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. And we ran a campaign sort of spearheaded by Bob Eisenberg, who was one of our board members at the time, who was involved with Environmental Defence and Ontario Neighbour, who were both large environmental NGOs. And so we ran a campaign called Campaign Lake Simcoe, and that resulted in getting the Lake Simcoe Protection Act and plan. And now we're a bit more than 10 years later, the plan's up for review, and so I stepped in to be the organization's first executive director. And we have a small staff, like very small, 3 people part-time, and a network of 26 member groups around the lake. And we're pushing to protect the plan and its review.
And for a lot of people who may not be familiar with the area or Lake Simcoe, it might just be a place weekend or swim in once in a while. Why does the lake need protecting? And can you kind of describe a little bit of a history of that process?
I mean, the number one point is that urban development, heavily urbanized, have impacts on water quality. I mean, we know in Aurelia, but what people might not know is that the part of the Lake Simcoe watershed is projected to double over approximately the next 20 years. So it is really a major growth area, and mostly that's suburban sprawl. And so that is the growing threat to Lake Simcoe. And I can, if you'd like, later about sort of what the actual process is and what that happens. We've got some really good videos on our website, rescuelakesimcoe.org, and on YouTube as well. We have a YouTube channel with lots of videos that are explainer videos, like what is the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan and how does development affect the lake and Lake Simcoe and climate change, for example. So I encourage people to check that out to learn more. But the history really is, you know, when we started the campaign to protect Lake Simcoe back in 2005, we were really concerned about suburban sprawl and poorly organized, poorly planned growth and its impacts on water quality. And we were concerned about some of the actions of the Conservation Authority in that regard. I mean, at this time, I have far fewer complaints about the Conservation Authority than we did at that time. But it didn't, it seemed like we needed a much stronger level of protection in order to protect the lake. So for example, there were some residents in Oro-Medonte at a place called Moon Point that were shocked to learn that a shoreline property that had yet been undeveloped was slated for development. It was unserviced, meaning there's no water pipes or anything going into it. And they were going to be estate lots, and it was on the shoreline. And we were just shocked that there was no protection for a rare feature, which is a naturalized Lake Simcoe shoreline. And so that was one of the impetuses for getting legislation, was what do we need on top of existing provincial laws in Ontario to protect Lake Simcoe from the impacts of development. There are other threats too: climate change, invasive species, phosphorus loading from a number of sources. Those are the main.
And then this year, the government of Ontario announced the review process starting, the 10-year review process. And on the face of it, to me at least, it sounds like a good thing in terms of, I think the official quote was like, amendments to the plan to continue to protect and restore the lake. Why does this concern you and your group?
So this is a statutory obligation. The province of Ontario is required to review this legislation every 10 years. So it's not that it's their choice. I'm concerned because the current provincial government has done really nothing to protect the environment. They're really wrecking a lot of things, and I don't think they have the experience to rebuild things in a good way. So we're concerned because of their track record. And we're concerned because, I started off by talking about the impacts of development as the largest growing threat to the lake. As I said, there are others, but given the very close relationship that's well documented in the media between the current development community, I think that's why we're concerned. So we're asking people to voice their own genuine feelings about Lake Simcoe and what they want to see happen, because I believe very strongly that people all around the lake and people across Ontario would support protecting the best watershed-based legislation in Canada to protect what's called the jewel of Ontario. We should treat it like a jewel.
And what would some of these protection measures, how would they kind of impact development or planning in Barrie in particular?
Our position is really that we want to protect the plan. We don't really want to see it changed. You can just go back to my previous comment that I don't have a lot of confidence in the government of Ontario at the moment to review and reform environmental policy. Look at what they did to the conservation authorities. They just, what did David Crombie call it? Bombing, some kind of bombing. Anyway, so what we have right now at Lake Simcoe is actually quite good in terms of impact policies that reduce the impacts of development. So, for example, some of the policies that we have in the Lake Simcoe watershed or basin, the area that drains into the lake, that are different than in other parts of Ontario, we have quite strong stormwater planning. So if a developer comes forward and says, I want to build on this plot, here's my plan. The way it has been working so far, and I expect how it continues to work, but it remains to be seen. The developer then goes to the Conservation Authority if that proposal affects the environment. And the Conservation Authority then says, okay, so here's what you need to do to make this a more environmental. Mostly what that looks like is managing sediment on site. Everybody's gone by developments that just look like a pile of mud, and then it rains or it snows or something, wind blows. The dirt goes everywhere. The dirt has phosphorus in it. So as that just loads into our rivers and streams, not only does it have the potential to smother the places where fish lay their eggs, which can lead to dead fish eggs, but also phosphorus load in the lake because there's phosphorus in the soil. So we really do need to control sediment. So we have policies that help to increase those protections. And like I said, we have policies to reduce the storm water that flows off a site, and so that it's captured on site and it goes down into our underground water sources, many of which feed our drinking water, rather than it rushing down a river, eroding the banks, stirring up dirt and sediment and throwing it into the lake where it adds to phosphorus.
And so that could change like the look, the smell, like everything about the lake, right?
Absolutely. So the lake's most famous, its biggest problem is phosphorus pollution. It's very common in especially small lakes. I mean, there's pollution throughout the Muskokas and the Kawarthas as well. And, you know, Lake Ontario also, some of the Lake Ontario shoreline, and Lake Erie, of course, is quite famous for major phosphorus pollution problems. So what actually happens there is that there's too much nutrient loading into the water that settles down to the bottom of the lake, and then it stimulates weeds. And when those excess weeds die and decompose, oxygen is actually stripped from the water. So at Lake Simcoe, the keystone species that we use to determine whether the lake is healthy or not are the cold water, really popular for our $420 million sustainable recreation sector. You know, fishing on Lake Simcoe is a big deal. So we need to keep those fish healthy for the fishermen and for the economy. And so it's important that we're looking at what the fish have to breathe, and that's one of the measures that that's used to determine lake health. So as you have excess phosphorus and nitrogen going into the lake, you end up with less oxygen in the water. Yeah, and it also contributes to algae blooms, and that's something that I think a lot of people have seen, sort of green along the shore, and that is aesthetically unpleasant. It means people are less inclined to fish and swim, and it can contribute to other problems too.
And as far as development goes, are you referring to like immediate like lakefront development, or does development that happens like, for example, in Barrie's town, could that affect the lake as well?
Yeah, I mean, Barrie's downtown is on the lakefront.
Yeah.
It is, but like Newmarket and Bradford and Aurora and some of Uxbridge and Beaverton, like those are all, or Beaverton's on the shoreline, but Brock, like those are all within the Lake Simcoe watershed. It's a really big area. And what happens upstream affects the lake.
Yeah, because it seems like a lot of people might assume that you're just talking about like lakefront cottages, where it is actually like a much wider swath of land, right?
Right. Now, of course, if you're building in Newmarket, longer for that water to reach the lake, there have been a lot of efforts made and real success by the Conservation Authority, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, and the Conservation Foundation to restore, for example, the East Holland River that flows through Newmarket and Aurora and ends up, or those drain into the East Holland River, and that drains into the south end of Lake Simcoe at Cook's Bay. So there have been a lot of remediation efforts there to try to slow down the flow and absorb some of the pollutants and deal with some of the sediment. And actually this November, the federal government announced a $40 million water treatment plant on the Holland River. So we're hoping that will be built, as they say, in the next 3 to 4 years. They say that will remove 40% of the phosphorus loads going into the lake, which tells you how heavy a load is coming from the Holland River, draining Newmarket, Aurora, those southern municipalities. So that's a really good sign. The York region has also committed money to that project as well. It would be good if the province did too, and we'd like to see that built ASAP. But it's important that we are nowhere near the phosphorus load target. We are double or more what scientists tell us is a healthy amount of phosphorus going into the lake every year. So we're going to need more than just some multi-million-dollar treatment plants. So we really want to make sure that the protections that are in the legislation that reduce the that reduce the impacts of development and other activities stay strong. I think one of the reasons for doing that is that you do spread out the cost of rehabilitating the lake among all of those who are profiting from some kind of activity in the lake.
Okay, and as far as concrete steps that you and the coalition are going to take now, kind of moving into this new year, what's next for you and your group?
So we got notice, as did everyone else, that was going to start December 18th, 6:30 p.m. So as everyone's going, so we took 2-3 weeks to regroup and talk about what to do from here. And so as of last weekend, we've got our priorities up on our website, rescuelakesimcoe.org. We have a live petition, and that petition goes to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, that's Jeff Urick, and it'll go to the signers MPP as well, and it'll also go to the email province that's collecting feedback about the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. So what that petition says, and this is the action we would love everybody to take, it really says, you know, in the absence of information that tells us that there's a compelling argument for changing the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, don't change it, implement it. We have two priorities. One is bringing down phosphorus loads. And that's really a government activity. It's not something that the public or charities can do. It requires regulation, oversight, detailed plans, targets, timelines, year-by-year targets, and so on. The second priority that we have is protecting our forests and wetlands. So as you started off by saying, you know, Lake Simcoe may be a place where people come for recreation. We have loads of beautiful places to walk, cross-country ski, hike, bike, swim, sail, boat, fish. So a lot of people value those areas. And we did some research over the past year with some funding from the Greenbelt Foundation to look at how well protected our natural areas are. So we do want to see policy protections for sensitive landscape features and high quality natural cover areas and large areas, large forests. We really want to see the policy protections increased on those. And one of the reasons is, you know, I just go back to the science basis of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. It was really strongly advised by a science team and a multidisciplinary team, of which I was one, but it was, you know, developers and builders and municipalities and farmers and tourism all together putting the plan together. And that plan says we should have 40% high quality in the watershed. We have about 35% natural cover now. We're losing natural cover a little bit over time. Those losses have slowed down with better provincial policy and better protection of those features, but we really want to make sure that's not, that doesn't go in the wrong direction. Municipalities have a really big role to play here. Mm-hmm. So we have gone around to all the municipalities, or almost all the municipalities in the watershed, to ask them to pass a resolution that says more or less what I just said. We want the Ontario government to work towards achieving the phosphorus target and the natural heritage target. In a nutshell, I'm paraphrasing. And quite a lot of municipalities have endorsed that 100%. So Barrie is one of them. Barrie was the first, so way to go, Barrie, and you're a very progressive council. Also Aurelia, super progressive, but also, and Brock, Georgina Island First Nation, and the municipality of Georgina. Those municipalities have all said, yes, this is what we want. They're in line with that. I think we aren't from Barrie, but are from like Innisfil and Bradford, Ramera, Oro-Medonte in particular, not Oro-Medonte in particular, but those four, Ramera, Oro, Innisfil, and Bradford, to municipal council, because they are providing comments to the province too. And I would bet that those comments count more to the province than my comments, or than the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition's comments, because they're not really listening to the environmental community too well. So it is really, really key that people who care about this issue and want to have the privilege to be able to continue swimming in our lake, to tell your municipality that you can't just say we want to protect Lake Simcoe, you have to actually do something about it. Many municipalities have. We do need them to take stand, and we need them to step up more than they have so far.
Do you feel overall encouraged by the community support you've received so far? Like, how does that weigh as rolled back some measures? But on the other hand, it seems like you do have a lot of municipal and individual support.
Yeah, I think all of those things are true at the same time, even if it's not synchronous. I think that the moment in time that we have and the opportunity that we have politically, I mean, the government really is in trouble. I mean, the Globe and Mail put out an editorial a couple of days ago, really slamming the government for their clear paving the way for developers to do what they want through the use of through their evisceration of the Conservation Authorities Act. I think local MPPs are aware that people who care about the environment are pretty mad at them. And on top of that, there are a lot of other really key issues that the government of Ontario is getting hammered on right now, like people in long-term care homes. Well, thank God there's needle for them, but they never got the protection they were promised or that they deserve. Anyway, there are a whole lot of issues around COVID and protecting workers and just moving forward as a 21st century province, protecting people who need some protection, who we rely on as essential workers. So I think that there are a lot of people who have a lot of beefs with the government right now, and I'm hopeful that they're going to be really careful with Lake Simcoe as a result of that. Lake Simcoe is historically a conservative stronghold, provincially and federally. There are some ridings that are a bit contested, but not that much. So I think if the MPPs in the area really want to hang on to their seats, they should listen to us and just don't change the plan. don't change the plan. Just work on implementing it.
Yes, I guess it's not that much action that you're asking. It's just like inaction instead, right? So
yeah, I don't want them rewriting this policy. And I don't see why they would, unless it was to make things easier for the development community. Anyway, we need more information from the province. That was our first move, was write a letter to the minister to say, well, where's the science upon which we could make a decision about whether something should be changed or not. So we haven't seen it. We only have 7 weeks left until the public survey is over. So we're just going ahead like, okay, guess this is all we're getting. And, let's not change the plan. Let's just implement the plan and protect Lake Simcoe. It deserves it.
Well, thank you so much as well with this process going forward.
Thank you.